After my experience in Congress, most of which was spent fighting wars, it was, I will tell you, a very tough time going through that for year after year after year. And one person who helped me make it through it is here tonight. I want to introduce the one and only Elizabeth Kucinich, my wife. She's hiding in the corner there. Elizabeth, you want to stand up, please, so people can see you? Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you. Before I begin, remarks I'd actually prepared for this occasion, because this is the first time since 9/11 that I've actually kind of created a synthesis that I wanted to share with what I think is a group that's emerging as one of the most formidable groups for truth in this country. But I just have something that I want to share with you before I begin. And that's about what happened yesterday in Utah with Charlie Kirk. I didn't know Charlie, but I will say this, that mass violence, which we're talking about here tonight, mass violence impels and creates personal violence, which in turn creates mass violence. So whatever your politics, please understand that the assassination of Charlie Kirk is a grave assault on our nation. It diminishes all of us. It challenges us to recognize that we have to escape this endless rotation of the wheel of violence. We are dedicated to turning the tide. So thank you for being here this evening. It's actually exhausting just to listen and to remember and hear the testimony of everyone who's been here, who's in the last yesterday, today, and I can anticipate tomorrow. For those of us who have been through it in the last 20-some years, it's hard to listen to. It stirs up some deep emotions. And I just have to say, Kurt and to Richard Gage, you know, how much I appreciate being here. But it's not without a lot of emotion, hearing this. It all comes back, Kurt, Dana. It all comes back. And so this is the first time that I've really spoken about it and put it together since then. And I hope that, that as I make this presentation, you'll see that the point of view that I'm offering fits neatly with the work of turning the tide, Richard, the work that you've been doing since that day. So it's been well established that Israel and the U.S. are partners. What is not understood is the square dance-like sequence, the deadly do-si-do back and forth of that partnership involving 9/11. The U.S. and Israel aligned in prevarication, determinedly, wrongly associating the motive, the intent, and the execution of the attacks, wrongly associating it with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Immediately after 9/11, Netanyahu, who was in America on that day, was asked by the BBC what the attack meant for U.S.-Israeli relations. It's very good, he said. It's very good. Then he caught himself. Well, not very good. It will generate immediate sympathy. On September 12th, in a CNN interview, Mr. Netanyahu said, quote, "It's not just bin Laden, it's not just a network, it's also the states that harbor and support them, Iraq, Iran, the Taliban, and Afghanistan." A few days later, on September 16, 2001, Vice President Cheney appeared on NBC News' Meet the Press, and he claimed, "We also have evidence that Saddam Hussein's been harboring terrorists, including Al-Qaeda." On the first anniversary of 9/11, on the evening of September 11, 2002, President Bush, with New York's Ellis Island as a backdrop, gave a speech which set the stage for conflating Iraq with 9/11. The next day, September 12, 2002, in Washington, D.C., Benjamin Netanyahu appeared before the Congressional Committee of which I was a member, and with the unmistakable intent of influencing Congress to vote to go to war against Iraq because of 9/11, he said, "Do you believe that action can be taken against Saddam only after he builds nuclear bombs and using them? And do various critics, especially overseas, believe a clear connection between Saddam and 9/11 must be established before we have a right to prevent the next 9/11? He was making the connection, false, between Iraq and 9/11. He said, he continued, the most compelling case for preemption against Saddam's regime, I believe, was not the president's powerful words, but the savage action of the terrorists themselves on September 11th. He went on to say, there's no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking, is working, is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. If you take out Saddam, I guarantee you, he told Congress, I guarantee it, that will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. After 9/11, the United States must act preemptively against terrorist regimes, said Netanyahu. Now, in this congressional hearing, I had a chance to ask Mr. Netanyahu some questions. And one question I asked was this, Mr. Netanyahu, what other countries would you have us bomb? He answered, Iran, Libya. A few weeks later, on October 2nd, 2002, as the leader of the effort against the war, I began personally distributing on the floor of the House of Representatives a detailed memo. I put it in the hands of hundreds of members. The memo was frank and clear, and it stated that based on all credible and available information, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, with al-Qaeda's role, that Iraq had neither the intention nor the capability of attacking the U.S., that there was no credible evidence that Iraq was either possessing or was about to use weapons of mass destruction, and that America was about to enter a bloody abyss based on misinformation, disinformation, and outright lies. On October 7, 2002, President Bush spoke in Cincinnati proclaiming, we've learned that Iraq has trained al-Qaeda members in bomb making and poisons and deadly gases. On October 10th, 2002, the House of Representatives, swept up in an endless stream of government chest-thumping, patriotic retribution, parroting media war talk, voted 296 to 133 to wage war against Iraq. The Senate followed the next day. On January 28, 2003, at his State of the Union address, President Bush told Congress, evidence from intelligence sources indicates Saddam Hussein had links to terrorist organizations, including al-Qaeda. On February 5, 2003, General Colin Powell, the U.S. Secretary of State, in an appearance before the United Nations Security Council, we all remember it, he asserted, Iraq today harbors a deadly terrorist network headed by Abu Massad al-Zarqawi, an associate and collaborator of Osama bin Laden and his al-Qaeda lieutenants. On February 18, 2003, in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, Benjamin Netanyahu said, if we do not prevent the marriage of militant Islam with weapons of mass destruction, 9/11 will be a mere prelude. The next month later, on March 15th, Mr. Netanyahu, in an interview with the Jerusalem Post, said, the removal of Saddam Hussein is essential in the global war on terror. It's the lesson of 9/11. On March 16, 2003, Vice President Cheney said on Meet the Press, we believe Iraq has had a relationship with al-Qaeda that's gone on for a number of years. On March 18th, a few days later, President Bush provided a presidential determination, which is a legal justification for attacking Iraq, in a letter to Congress. I've determined that Iraq's continuing threat and links to terrorist organizations, including al-Qaeda, require action, the letter said. And then on March 19th to 20th, 2003, the U.S. instituted a so-called shock and awe, a massive military attack on Iraq. On March 21st, 2003, the President formally notified Congress under the War Powers Resolution that combat operations had begun. He said, I've also determined that the use of armed force against Iraq is consistent with actions against international terrorists and terrorist organizations, including those who aided in the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001. They kept going, conflating Iraq with 9/11. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, the once and future leader of Israel, and President George Bush, each conflated Iraq with 9/11 synchronously at key moments, each with the same purpose: a deadly orchestration towards a premeditated war against Iraq, which 9/11 was used to falsely justify. We know now that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but at least 1 million innocent Iraqis died because of that war. 5,000 of our brave servicemen and women lost their lives in that war. Our economy suffered greatly, at least $5 trillion in cost. Our national honor was tarnished. And as Colonel Schaefer mentioned a moment ago, no one has ever been held to account. However, several presidential candidates were even based upon proudly voting for the war with Iraq, against Iraq. So the United States was misled into a war based on lies about 9/11. And despite, or Richard, perhaps because of the report of the 9/11 Commission, many questions remain unanswered. After 9/11, for the next, after we went to war, for the next 8 years, I gave over 300 presentations in Congress, pointing out over and over and over the lies, the loss of life, the cost, calling not just for the end of the war, but for new direction in U.S. policy in the region. I introduced legislation for the creation of a cabinet-level Department of Peace to begin a new effort to shift the consciousness of the nation away from violence as a way of settling conflict, to avert deadly violence at home and war abroad. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu, notwithstanding his twisting of facts, conflation of Iraq with 9/11, is cheerleading for the U.S. to go to war with Iraq at such a horrible cost of blood and treasure, has nevertheless ascended in the estimation of Washington. Bereft of any credibility on what constitutes U.S. national security, in the ensuing years, the Israeli Prime Minister has been successful in gaining U.S. weapons to bomb Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Gaza, the West Bank, and most recently, Qatar. The U.S. pursued Israel's interest in bombing Libya, murdering Gaddafi, and then murdering Iran's General Soleimani. Now, Netanyahu gave a speech to Congress last year during which he received an astonishing 55 standing ovations, as he called for America to stand together, this time against Iran. When we stand together, we win and they lose, he said, urging a U.S. attack on Iran, which occurred less than a year later, with the U.S. bombing 3 of Iran's nuclear sites. We stood with Netanyahu and his country in Iraq, and we lost. We lost our national honor. We lost our men and women who put their lives on the line. A second attack on Iraq looms, which could well precipitate World War III. When we stand together in illegal aggression, we all lose. Now, Israel has often complained that it has no one to negotiate with to bring an end to conflicts or fend off future wars. They make sure of it. For those interested in peaceful negotiations, meetings arranged by the U.S. supposedly to reach an agreement with Iran or with Hamas and Qatar end up being traps, opportunities for Israel to kill the negotiators. Venezuela recently was more likely the target of an attack on its boat in international waters, killing 11 people, not because of a new U.S. interest in anti-illegal drug efforts, but most likely because Venezuela does not support the genocide happening in Gaza under the Netanyahu government. It's noteworthy that the U.S. imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court and Francesca Albanese, Special UN Rapporteur on the rights of the Palestinian territory, just for calling out Israel on its inhumanity. America has forgotten the lessons of 9/11 as to who we can and can't trust with respect to international policy, and it is affecting us here at home. Domestically, our constitutionally guaranteed rights under the First Amendment, freedom of speech, under attack. Academia has been published for dissent about genocide, universities dealt heavy fines, students expelled, all in the name of enforcing a narrowly redefined anti-Semitism as a way to deflect protests against the Israeli government's policies of theft of Palestinian land, ethnic cleansing, starvation, genocide, all with the tacit approval and funding of the United States of America, and it's wrong. The United States, our social reality has been reconstructed to support genocide and to support the policies of a nation and its leaders who lead us from one bloody conflict to another. The U.S. may protect Israel with its veto in the Security Council, but it cannot protect it from the hundreds of millions of people worldwide who are not misled, who know wrong when they see it, and condemn murder for what it is. If truth equals anti-Semitism, it's time to perhaps to examine what anti-Semitism really is. The facts are that countless Gazans have died. Gazans are being starved. The reality is that a large-scale program of ethnic cleansing is ongoing. If we allow this bleak reality to be dismissed as merely politically motivated anti-Semitism, we allow that to happen, we're all being reduced to moral ignorance. Now, 6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust. Never again means never again. It means it for Jews, it means it for Gazans, it means it for people everywhere. Israel cannot survive the contradiction of having a history of such immense suffering and inhumanity inflicted upon Jews by the Nazis, only to see its own country stand accused before the world of murderous crimes which recall the Nazi era. We are all warned in the book of Matthew, quote, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand." We should all want all the hostages brought home. We should mourn the deaths of every innocent Israeli. If we mourned the deaths of every innocent Palestinian in Gaza, we might well drown in our own tears. The death of truth, however, is beyond mourning. It is the final knell for the American Republic. And that is why, Richard, what you're doing and what Turn the Tide is about is a chance to help protect and save our country. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As I conclude, I want to ask this question. Why is it that we in America, who pride ourselves on freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, why are we not permitted to ask questions about the apparent destructive symbiotic relationship between the U.S. and Israel, about the constant strategic deception, about the billions that go for mass murders, about the undue influence that Israeli interests have on our own government? Why can't we probe further into the advisability of having the leaders of a nation of 10 million influence the most important national security decisions of our nation of 350 million? It is time for the U.S. to assert our own hard-won sovereignty, not through escalatory rhetoric and illusions of world dominance, but by thoroughly examining the premise not only of U.S.-Israeli relations, but of all of our foreign entanglements. Let's start taking care of things here at home. I do not believe that the people of the United States support stealing people's homes. I do not believe that today's Americans support the theft of people's lands. I do not believe Americans want to starve people or want to murder children or want to see their tax dollars support genocide. We do have serious political differences in America, which outside elements exploit. We know that. The polarization and the partisanship, which is evident, cause us to lose sight of what unites us. At such a time, we must remember things that help hold us together. What binds us together as American people is a sense of common decency, a desire to do the right thing, a desire to see our families flourish and our communities thrive, a belief in goodness and God in our communities, and a hope for something that we used to call the American dream: a home, hearth, health, education, jobs, decent wages, retirement security. We cannot hope to attain this unless we're truly free and independent with no permanent friends or foes, just the permanent social and economic interests of the American people as our first commitment and as our highest fiduciary responsibility. As we strive, we must remember who misled us into war against Iraq over 9/11 and be thoroughly cautious. Thanks again, Richard, Kurt, and all of you here, to turning the tide, and those who know that we do not fear asking the deeper questions that followed the events of 9/11/2001, 24 years ago. Everything that we're told about 9/11, which was instrumental in leading us to attack Iraq, has been proven to be a lie. Accordingly, we have a clear right and an obligation to search for answers to the fundamental question about the planning of 9/11, its execution, the physical effects, the structural consequences when the planes hit the World Trade Center. We have the capacity. We have the capacity to learn the truth about 9/11, about the motivations, about whose interests were being served, about the phenomena like the collapse of Building 7 in New York City, about the lies that took us into war, about the lies that kept us in war, about the lies which even now build a war consciousness so ubiquitous that for the first time since the Civil War, an American city has been threatened by our own government with war. Serious, unanswered questions will not go away. The conspiracy, if there was one, was against the truth and against the American people. So let us continue with a limitless quest for answers. Fear not drawing conclusions that shake the foundations of this country, because truth is the path to national reconciliation. Truth is the path to bind up our wounds. Never has there been a time in the history of America where the quest for defining truth is of such importance. Truth, rescued from our deepest, darkest recesses. Truth, facing our deepest fears. Truth, liberating a nation tired of being told lies by people in high places with low motives. The Bible says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So, my dear friends, let us fearlessly march through the fog of disinformation, misinformation, manufactured intelligence, and psyops. We move forward dauntlessly towards an uplit path. Thank you.